Welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Petra Lohmeyer, and this is the podcast from employee to entrepreneur. And just to recap who this is for employees who would like to become entrepreneurs and who would like to not fall into all the potholes that I fell into. And it is also for people who train entrepreneurs, because most of the people who used to trained entrepreneurs who were already entrepreneurial and just wanted to get to the next level or wanted to get in. While in future, there may be a lot of ex-employees who would like to become entrepreneurs or who have to become entrepreneurs simply because of all the changes that are coming due to digitalization, automation, and globalization, but also because of the higher life expectancy. A lot of people may retire in their 50s at some point, but then they have another 70 years to go, and what to do with that? And what they really want to do may not have a vehicle. And being an entrepreneur may give them this vehicle that they have, but it's a completely different mindset that you have as an employee than you have as an entrepreneur. So I'm showing you a little bit what my journey was and where I went wrong and where I probably thought differently than somebody who already had an entrepreneurial spirit. So today's episode is about live events. It is one of the first things that I did simply because I saw other people do them, and you're supposed to model other people who have already been there. And my outcome for these was partly or primarily to add value, because I had seen quite a few speakers lately and they added massive value to me and made my life really something better. And that's what I wanted to pass on. And also at the end of it, I saw them upsell some of their services, and that was also my outcome, to upsell certain services like coaching, for example, like group coaching in the form of a course, and also quite possibly in-house courses for business. So this was my preparation. Let me just double check again that this thing is still on, because I've had a bad experience before. And turns out my camera just shut itself down again, so I just had to start again, but that is okay. That is why I check nowadays during my presentations. So this was my preparation for these live events. First of all, I used a topic that I knew very well. It was change management, something I had done in corporations for over a decade. I had also had a lot of change in my own personal life. So this was something where I thought I could really add value. Plus, at the same time, while I was doing this, Brexit was going on. And it was one of the first times where they thought, okay, this is really going to happen now. So that is what I thought was a great hook. And that is what I used as a hook. It was also a big change where a lot of people who had never really been into change before and were very adverse to change would have to change. So I thought this was really something where I could add value. So I did, as preparation, I did rehearsals. So for about 2 weeks, I did a rehearsal twice a day and went through the entire presentation. I always used my computer with the slides on it and always use this little sticker to pass them on. And quite a few times I used the entire equipment, so including the white screen with the projector and all the sound as well, to make sure that everything worked. I had the show fully written out and memorized, because that is what I had seen a lot of the really famous people do. And a lot of times, if you take a look at the material that the famous people have, you will see, if you take a look at a video 30 years ago, they're still using exactly the same words sometimes that they're using today. Some of them are mixing it up now because I think they've heard this comment. But you see that initially this is how they started. And since I was modeling them, this is also what I thought, okay, I'll take a look. And I hadn't been on stage for quite a while. I had done trainings in companies before, but it was for like 50 people. Even if it was worldwide, it wasn't like standing on stage in front of a whole crowd and reacting to everything that they were doing. So I thought this was a good preparation. I rehearsed it with a coaching client that I had at the time, who was very, very helpful and a very nice guy. And he had just done, or said he had just done, this course about selling from the stage, and he wanted to really get into the material. And the best thing you get into to get into the material is to teach it to someone else. So he wanted to teach it to me, so I presented to him. He gave me feedback. I incorporated it into the presentation. It was incredibly helpful. He gave me some really good pointers. I didn't look that much into advertising and traffic yet because I didn't want to have that big an event in the beginning, and I just wanted to do it locally, and I thought that was just going to work the way that I had planned. And I had gone to several other speakers' events as well. Several of them looked exactly at how they were doing the selling, what I thought worked on me, what didn't work, what I was comfortable with, what I wasn't comfortable with, how they were structuring their talk, and all these kinds of little things. And I think at that point, I had actually already gone to one of these speakers' courses, which was incredibly helpful. I'm not going to tell you necessarily, who it was and sell this now, but it was helpful because it showed me a system of how I could systemize my own material, and also gave tricks on what other speakers use in order to psychologically prepare people to buy even before they are asking for their money. And there's a whole lot of stuff that I wasn't really aware of. So I thought that was really helpful. I also got their end pitch down. You see, if you go to a lot of these events, you see that they always list these things down, and then they do a price drop at the end. And I'd seen these and structured my talk that way as well. So when it came to the first talk, I used a theater that was very close to where I was living because I thought that was a good idea to do. For starters, I knew the theater. It was a great event. It was a great area with lots of traffic and a positive crowd. The room wasn't too expensive to rent. And since there was a lot of traffic, I thought that, my flyers were also going to be seen. It was a beautiful room with a sound equipment, which unfortunately was not compatible with what I had with me. So that was the first learning experience that I realized, okay, next time I'm going to have to use my own equipment or check it out beforehand, because I had quite a lot of sound cues, like humorous cues in that little presentation, and then I was singing a couple of songs with background music, and all of that didn't work. But this is just the kind of stuff that happens. It was a learning experience. It was okay. So I thought the theater would do the advertisement in their brochure. Turns out they don't. But that is how green I was. So you have to actually buy the advertising in a brochure. And so my thinking process that it would actually help them to have more events that are really beneficial, you know, didn't quite work out. And then I also printed some flyers, and I asked them if I could put them out, and they said, yeah, that's fine. And I put them out into the slots where they told me to put them, which was next to everybody else's, another 20 or 30 other flyers, but at least mine were there as well. And I asked them to put behind reception, and that's what they also did. And then I advertised on Facebook and LinkedIn to my contacts. At least that's what I thought I was doing, because I just posted it on Facebook and I posted it on LinkedIn. And I thought my contacts were going to see that. We're going to get to that later in a different podcast where I will be discussing the interesting details, not maybe the details, but some interesting facts about a Facebook algorithm. But anyway, so I didn't know that. I had about, I don't know how many contacts at the time. I think maybe between 1,500 or 4,000 Facebook contacts at the time. And I thought I was actually showing it to them. I don't think I was doing Facebook ads at that point yet. So I booked the room for 2.5 hours, and 1 hour before the event for setup, and half an hour thereafter, and the event was supposed to be an hour. And if it runs over, we would have a little bit of time left. And I came 1.5 hours early to set up the room and make a sign to put out for people to find it. So this is how this went. I set everything up, and then I walked out 5 minutes before the event to take a look if that sign was still there. Turns out I couldn't find the sign. So nobody knew where the event was or that it was even on. So I went to reception and I asked them, what happened to the sign? And they said, oh, it's out there. I looked at the sign, it said corporate event. It wasn't a corporate event. So I wouldn't even have found my own event, looking at the sign. So I took out, some of the flyers that I have and kind of posted it over that thing. So at least people who would come late would understand. Hold on, I just threw out my I threw out my earpiece, being too excited about all this. So that people who would come late would at least understand where the event is. So initially there was nobody there, but then 2 people came. So thank God, 2 people came 10 minutes late. Well, It was, I think, yeah, it was one person from my meetup, which I thought was probably the local neighborhood watch having an eye on me because I was a foreigner in the country, and it was also a friend of hers. But it was two people, which was great. So I did the event, which I had planned anyway, and I recorded it on two cameras and on a sound equipment. And one of the things I had always been really nervous about was looking at the eyes of the audience during the talk because I thought I was going to lose my train of thought. Turns out it's very, very difficult not to look at the audience if you only have two people there. You know, if you have like 100, you know, like you're singing or something, you can just scan over the audience and pretend you're looking at someone while you're never actually making eye contact. But if there's two people there, you can't do that. And it looks like stupid, right? So I had to look at them. Turns out it wasn't a problem. And it turns out, while it may have been a little bit uncomfortable for them because was constantly looking back and forth, I also saw the reactions to the material in them, and I could adapt the material. So that was a really interesting experience. Now, as I said, the sound didn't work properly, but I made do. And after the event, of course, you know, I did this whole sales pitch and everything, and they came up to me and said, "Oh, by the way, you know, if you go to London, there's a real psychologist who does this course that you're trying to sell for such and such for about a quarter of the price." I thought at the time that, you know, change management is an interesting field. And if you work in a corporation, you see that a lot of the theories that you see coming in from psychologists don't really work because not because the people who develop these theories don't know what they're doing. They know very much what they're doing, but of course they boil down everything they're doing into like 4 or 5 points, you know, or into a small framework. And then if something comes outside that framework, they know what to do. But a psychologist who learns from them and just read a book from them doesn't know all these thousands of other things, and maybe, you know, adds in their own things of how things should be, and that just doesn't work. So but I wasn't going to argue about that at that point. But what was really great was they stayed for 45 minutes afterwards. The man that my friend brought had initially thought this is going to be a really, really dry presentation, which he also said, but then he got so excited about it that he really wanted to quit his job the next day, and I got really nervous about that because I thought, okay, this is exactly not what I said in the presentation. I said you have to be really prepared with what you're doing. But he was at the point in his life where he had an illness. He had been diagnosed with an illness which he thought he was going to die from, and shortly before the event he had been given a medication that suddenly reversed it. So he thought he had much longer to live. So he was looking for something to do with the rest of his life. And there came my event. And it was such a great conversation. I literally flew home. It was only two people. I could have been really down, but I flew home. I was whooping in my car and I thought, oh my God, this is it. And this is what I want to do. I may have only helped one person, but I've helped that one person. And it was a great experience. So this was the beginning of the whole events bit. Now, things went interesting after that. So the next event I did was also close to me, but in a different area. It was a little bit more of a rundown area. Now let me take a look if this is still working here. Yes, it is. Okay. So, but it was a church. So the venue wasn't quite as fitting as the theater was, but it had good acoustics, I thought. There was a problem with the lighting because it was pretty light in there, so people could see me well, but they couldn't see the screen all that well. So I didn't know how to adjust that because if I put the lighting out or tried to put something in front of the windows, then they wouldn't be able to see me. But if I left it all open, then I would be able to see the presentation. So that is something to have in mind if you go to a venue. Then I left some flyers a few days before with parishioners, and I made a big sign because it was right at the a busy street, I thought, and made a big sign for people to come in and left it out an hour before. So I came an hour before for setup, had somebody really, really nice there to help me, and she watched the rehearsal and she really liked it. She just didn't have time to stay because she had to be somewhere else, but she told me that I should have advertised more. Well, when the event started, I realized why she said that. Because nobody came. So I was in that big church all by myself. And I thought, okay, you know what? I will still record this here because I had seen the recording of the last venue in the theater, and there were a lot of things. While the feedback from the people who actually were there was really good, and they were probably just blown away by all that personality coming at them all this time, I looked at the recording. I thought, oh my God. I mean, for starters, what I was wearing wasn't working at all. The colors weren't working. The fit wasn't working. The sound was awful. Not just the recording itself, but I used so many filler words. I literally used or and or so every 3 words, and I wasn't aware of it at all. So there were a lot of things that I could improve. And I thought, okay, if I, even if nobody's there, I'm going to record this. And I may, and because I thought that I may use some of these recordings in the future as show reels or as material online, I really took it seriously, which was a really great thing because I'm kind of a money actor. You know, if I see it as a rehearsal, I have a real problem getting into it. And 20 minutes in, I hear these people outside, you know, while I don't know what I was doing right now. I was either talking or I was singing. I hear these people talking outside. Well, you know, she started already. Well, we can't go in there now. I mean, it's going to be really embarrassing. And then, you know, they keep arguing out there while I'm recording this. So it was quite an interesting experience. I sang my heart out. You know, the acoustics was great in that church. So I sang my heart out and thought, okay, maybe I, you know, this didn't work out for me, but maybe I can use it as a really great recording, right? And this time, the sound equipment worked. So I had worked out how to work the equipment. So the next time I did an event, I went to the West End. And I thought that was going to be really great because there's so many people there. There are so many people outside. I think at that point also Facebook ads. I published it on social media again, LinkedIn and Facebook. And I get there, and this time I didn't have time to take a look at the event beforehand. Turns out the venue sucked. I mean, there is just no other way to say it. I mean, for starters, it was on the third floor in some dance studio, you know, which was the layout didn't work. They refused to let me put out any kind of flyers or any kind of advertisement at reception or anywhere around there. The venue was next door. It had a combination lock downstairs and no bell, so people couldn't get in. So what I did was, so 20 minutes before, I asked some of the guys who were smoking there if they could keep the door open so that people could at least come in. And I put a big sign on the door that this event was going to be there, which I was hoping that people were going to see because there were hundreds of people walking past, right? So, and I then also went out and tried to give flyers to people who were queuing outside, and went on Leicester Square because it was right up around the corner from Leicester Square, and handed out flyers to people, and then realized that my hook with the Brexit thing didn't work at all because either people fully ignored me or they started to attack me because they thought that I had done a political organization or that I was having a political message and I was trying to influence people or something. I wasn't. Brexit was just a change that was coming, and I was trying to help people through change. I wasn't, you know, taking one side or the other, although obviously I had an opinion, but that wasn't what it was about. Brexit was supposed to be the hook. But so anyway, so it wasn't the most pleasant experience. But I went up about 20 minutes before, put myself into the right state again. Was glad my equipment hadn't been stolen, which at that point I was really afraid of. The good thing about this experience was the equipment finally all worked, except the lighting again, but all the recordings and everything, the delivery, the clothes that I was wearing, all of these things, I was much more comfortable with. And when I watched the recording afterwards, I wasn't cringing anymore. But nobody came. So 10 minutes afterwards, I walked down and I thought, okay, I'll have to take a look if that door is at least open. Turns out the door was open, but the manager of the venue had put, because I was on the third floor, had put what do you call it? One of these ropes across the stairs to make sure that nobody was coming up to me. So I questioned him about it, and he said, well, I wanted to make sure that nobody goes up there because it's not safe because of health and safety. That was where my event was supposed to be. So he put a rope across to make sure that they went to the other event. I will never hire that venue again. That's obvious. So going on from there. So I went to. I think I did a couple of more events. I can't remember where one of them was, but one was south of the Thames. Again, it was an area that wasn't too good necessarily. It was a more of a poor area, but the venue was okay. It was a church community hall. I visited it before. I learned my lesson, and it was very very nice people. They also had locks on the door because it wasn't the best area, but they had a bell for people to ring. They let me put a sign up, and people were very friendly inside. Let me just check one more time if this is actually still. Yes, it is still working. Wonderful. And I advertised again on Facebook and LinkedIn. I walked door to door around the entire area with flyers and put it through people's post boxes and handed it to people that I saw on the street. I told them that this event was coming. I gave it the flyers to the receptionist and told her as well. This is not a political event. This is not something, because she put it right behind reception so that nobody could see it. Seeing Brexit on there. And I told her this is not a political event. This is, something nice to help people change. And I assured her, and so she put it out again. So anyway, so I got there on the day again. There was a wedding downstairs, so it was at least open. The door was open for people to come in, which was great. I set up half an hour before with a very, very friendly person there. I didn't realize I had to set up the chairs myself, so I got a little bit of a workout because I had to, I set up 30 or 50 chairs or something, and didn't realize. The equipment worked this time as well. It's just one person came. It was a French banker, and I was kind of thinking it was probably somebody my ex-employee sent, but she had a flyer. She was very nice. She was retired, and the feedback was that she couldn't believe that I hadn't actually delivered the speech, a lot of times before. So the speech really worked. I could speak to her directly. I could see her reactions. I could react to her reactions. I had amended some of the stuff in the speech. And she said it was really a shame that the English didn't come because this was really a good speech and they should have seen it. That means I got really, really good feedback. Of course, she also didn't buy anything, but I got really, really good feedback. Now, after all this, I stopped for a while, obviously, and then I moved on and I'm in Spain now. So I thought maybe I can, in order to get more traffic, maybe I can change this a little bit. So I went into what I thought was a touristy area with a lot of English and German people, which turned out not to be a touristy area with a lot of German and English people, but some of them were there. I did prepare 2 shows and adjusted it to the environment. So, put much more show elements in. I prepared one show for the campsite that I was at. Which would have been paired with paella and with some local other stuff as well, and which was kind of a package deal with the whole campsite, and also a nature walk, which would have been something to draw people in. And I rehearsed both of the shows. I had the first client, which was really helpful, and she liked it, and she came back twice. Well, and then COVID-19 hit, and it was all over again. So this was my experience with live events, and the lessons learned were obviously, take a look at the equipment, the sound equipment, and if it is compatible with local equipment. Also take a look at how the lighting works so that you can see the presentations as well as the speaker yourself. Always visit the venue beforehand, and even if it is far away and it costs quite a bit, going into London from where I was would have cost quite a bit. But the biggest thing is obviously, live events can't be the only thing that you use in order to drive traffic or to get traffic into your more higher end things, because live events can just go away, like with COVID-19 now. But also learn how to drive traffic, learn how to get people in. Just posting it somewhere and hoping that people come isn't going to work. What good came out of it? Now let's just take a look again if this is still running. Yes, it is still running. What good came out of it? You could think that I would be just totally, destroyed now because I did all this work and all this preparation and nothing worked. But you know what? A lot of really, really good things came out of it. For starters, I have a functional presentation that I can give in future. no matter if it is in a company or if it is somewhere on stage, I have practiced it several times. The equipment is tested. I know the different things. I don't get distracted by how the equipment works anymore. I rehearsed it in front of an audience. I learned how to make eye contact, how to break eye contact, how to elicit some feedback from them during the presentation, as well as amend my delivery depending on what I get. I got feedback from several people afterwards about what they thought what worked and what didn't, which was overwhelmingly positive. I also got feedback on my marketing, which was totally crap, of course, but it didn't cost me much because all these venues that I chose, I deliberately didn't choose these high upscale venues that cost you 300 an hour, but they were like $50, right? Then I've seen myself in several presentations in several different venues. I've seen what works with regards to outfits and so on and so forth, which I'm not necessarily incorporating when I'm doing stuff online. But if I am on a stage, I know what things probably won't work. I've also presented in different areas, which is more important than you'd think. Because as an actor, you know that if you rehearse a speech, for example, or a piece for an audition, and you rehearse it at home, you go to the audition, you may not actually remember it anymore, and people don't realize why that is. It is because your memory gets anchored to certain things, certain places where you are. So if you're standing next to a couch, for example, and that's where you always deliver a line, that memory may actually get attached to that couch, which means if you're not standing next to the couch, you don't remember the line anymore. Which means all this other stuff that I did, I've done it in different venues now, and I know that I can adjust it and that the memory will actually be there. Also, I've used a lot of this original material that I had in this first speech. I've gotten several speeches now that I can deliver, but a lot of the original material from this first speech, I'm still using. You know, a lot of the feedback that I got from my coaching clients, I'm using in online webinars, in online presentations. I'm using a lot of the material itself in different online, in creative ads, in different online presentations, and I don't have to practice it anymore. And I also practiced selling from the stage, and while I didn't sell anything because there was nobody there, I much more understand now what people are saying who are trying to teach me this stuff because I've tried it out, right? So it's much more real for me, and I see what they're doing and the things that I'm not doing, which I wasn't aware of when I hadn't actually recorded myself. What is also helpful to know is I'm not the only one that's happened to. And even people who are as famous as Tony Robbins or Dean Graziosi, you know, two of the people who are now teaching people how to do events on stage, when they first did their first event, Tony Robbins had 7 people show up. And that was after he was already a salesperson for 7 years. And he had, I think, for at least 4 or 5 years, filled events for Jim Rohn, you know, one of the motivational speakers. So he knew how to fill events already. I had no idea how to do all this. I didn't even know how important it was. And still he had this experience. Of course, nowadays he probably wouldn't because, you know, he wouldn't know everything about Facebook ads and all these other kinds of things. But it shows you that it isn't just for people who are totally stupid that this can happen to. Steve Graziosi, I think he had 4 people in his first event. He was a salesperson before that as well, and I wasn't. So this is not something that just happens to me. And I showed you all the different things that I thought would work, that I saw other people do, that I saw, you know, other events use, which just didn't work for me, right? Now, a few announcements. So this was my experience with live events, which may be interesting to some of you so that you can avoid some of these pitfalls. Now, some announcements. The challenge that I announced last time, I just decided to postpone it because literally an hour before this, I took a look at my email and I saw Tony Robbins is now doing a challenge. No, you know, the guy who's famous, has millions of people on his list, has famous clients and more resources than God. So if he's doing a challenge at the same time as me, I may not have all that many people, although I do have a little bit of a different crowd than he has probably. But I will do his challenge. And not because I want to steal from him, but because I want to take a look at what he's doing, how he's implementing it, because he is actually using exactly the same framework of challenge that I just learned. I just saw in the ad that he was doing. So I can take a look at what he's doing and see that what I'm doing actually complements what he's doing instead of, you know, trying to compete with it. and that I can adjust it to our people. So I'm not going to use his material. I'm just going to take a look at what can I do complementary to that. Also, it gives me a little bit of time to figure out some other things while because I just had some things happening here, so I need to figure out some things to keep things going, and I will just concentrate on the podcast for now. So please, if this was helpful today for you, please do subscribe and tell your family and friends. And next time I will tell you about what I did next.